Hello and good evening, everybody, and I would like to welcome everyone to tonight's episode. And tonight, I'm gonna change things up a little bit. Yeah, it's been over a year, and I've been following the same old pattern for quite a long time, ever since the show's existence. But I'd like to do a very special episode tonight. And as you can probably tell from the title of this video, I am going to try to establish what I consider to be the Mount Rushmore of metal albums. And what do I mean by that exactly, you might ask? Well, what I've basically done is, from my perspective, I have kind of subdivided the history of heavy metal into 4 different waves. And what I sought to do is pick one album from every single one of those waves, which I feel is the most representative of that era. Now, these would have to be albums that are legendary, that are well respected by most in the metal community, and of course also have some mainstream appeal to it. These would also be albums that I would say, if you're trying to get into heavy metal, maybe you should listen to this one. It's really good, and you can kind of see if this is your thing. Now, I gotta be also very clear about this. I am not saying that these are my 4 favorite metal albums ever. In fact, in most of the cases, or in some of the cases, I would not even call these my favorite albums by these artists. But as I said, I feel these are the ones that are the most representative of each wave that I've identified. And also, like I said, they would have to have mainstream appeal and would appeal to someone who may not be a fanatic about this genre. Now, another thing that I want to kind of clear up first. What constitutes heavy metal? Well, the truth of the matter is, there is no clear-cut answer, because it's a very, very fluid term, and I've seen some artists that I think are heavy metal not classified as that, and of course the opposite is true. I've seen some artists I don't think are heavy metal at all that have been called heavy metal. So again, this is a very, very fluid term. So where did I make the cutoff? What is my standard of heavy metal? Well, I went to the objective source. If Wikipedia called them metal, then I considered it. So there you go. I mean, I'm not going to say that is the best source of reliability, but it's just what I went with. Now, if you, again, disagree with my picks, and I'm sure a lot of people will, I would love to hear your picks. But remember, please make sure you're respectful. We do not need any profanity. We do not need any personal attacks. I started this channel as kind of a safe space so that metal fans could kind of converse among themselves and hear other points of view. So I very much do welcome your opinion and why you think I may be right, why you think I may be wrong, but please just adhere to the guidelines of this channel. And finally, as far as my criteria go, I would also say this. If a newcomer heard these 4 albums and disliked all 4 of them, I think it's pretty safe to say that heavy metal is just not for them. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. And I'd like to talk about the very first wave that I have designated. And this would run pretty much before or up to the year 1971, 1972-ish. And this is basically the formation years. Now, a lot of these artists definitely still have a lot of blues influences. We are coming off the heels of The Who and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And these would be artists that kind of took it a step further, kind of cranked it up, so you will. And some artists that I think definitely fall within this wave would, of course, be Led Zeppelin. Again, Wikipedia calls them heavy metal in some instances, so I respect that. We also have Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, absolutely. They are considered to be one of the big four formers of heavy metal. We also have Budgie, Welsh rock trio, or metal trio, I guess you could say. And I just recently discovered how amazing they are, and I'm glad I did. Not sure if this really falls under the parameters. This is definitely kind of a gray area here, but maybe Alice Cooper. I also reviewed an artist called Lucifer's Friend recently, and I reviewed their debut album, and that also falls under this wave. It falls under this era. But to be brutally honest, I need to go back to where it all started. I need to go back to what many historians consider to be the first truly legitimate heavy metal band, and that, of course, is none other than Black Sabbath. And I am going with their debut album right here. Now, I very easily could have gone with Paranoid. One could argue this is more accessible to maybe the mainstream audience and newcomers as well. But there definitely never would have been a Paranoid without this album, and to me, this one is the one that set the stage, so I consider this to be far more important than Paranoid, but again, feel free to disagree with me. But this was released in the year 1970 by, again, the British hard rock heavy metal artist Black Sabbath, made up of Ozzy Osbourne on lead vocals, the one and only Tony Iommi on lead guitar, Geezer Butler on bass guitar, and of course Bill Ward on the drums. And of course we have the title track, Black Sabbath. And this thing, again, why I think this took things a step further than maybe some of the other artists that I talked about, is yes, some of the other artists I talked about have very, very heavy rhythm sections and very definite guitar distortion, but these guys were scary. These guys were occult driven, and these guys were pushing the envelope far more, in my opinion. Sure, if you compare these guys to later artists, it's relatively tame, but again, to me, these guys took a major step forward in the formation of heavy metal. But again, we have the title track. Starts out with a very, very medieval feel to it, and it's just gothic and doomy. And I can't imagine how much in 1970 this scared the living bejesus out of people. But again, it starts out as doom metal and then picks up to a very explosive crescendo. We have The Wizard, which still has some definite blues influences, but it's all great just the same. First time I heard it, I was kind of turned off by the harmonica intro, but I've grown to love it. We also have kind of a medley right here with Wasp, Behind the Wall of Sleep, Basically, and NIB. And really, I think Wasp and Basically are just two little two instrumental pieces. But Behind the Wall of Sleep and NIB are the main centerpieces, and NIB is a classic song. It's got a nice cream feel to it also, and I love it. We have Wicked World, which, is kind of, to me, it's the most disposable song on here, but it's still really great about anti-Vietnam propaganda. And then, of course, we have Warning, which is also combined with Sleeping Village and a guitar solo called A Bit of Finger. It's very slow and still has those blues influences in it, but the Bit of Finger guitar solo, it absolutely rocks, okay? I mentioned this in a previous episode. Both Tony Iommi and Jimmy Page at the time released very similar guitar solos that were embedded into some of their songs. And, well, I think this one is a lot heavier than the one Jimmy Page did, and it's absolutely incredible. But, yeah, the rhythm of it is just so eerie. I just love it. So that is my first pick for the first wave of heavy metal as I've designated, and I guess this takes the George Washington spot, so I will kind of assemble that later, but that was my George Washington spot on my Mount Rushmore of heavy metal. Now I'm going to move to the second wave, and what's kind of interesting is over the past couple of years, what I've basically done is when I'm in the car, I like to listen to my CDs, and it was just so hard to decide what to grab. And oftentimes I would notice I just keep picking the same stuff over and over again. So I just started listening to all my albums in chronological order. That just makes things simple. Well, what I've noticed is right around the mid-70s or so, artists like Black Sabbath, Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, Alice Cooper, all the ones I mentioned beforehand, they're kind of winding down. They're kind of, past their heyday, and now other artists are starting to take more precedence, such as Kiss, Rush, AC/DC, if you call them metal, I don't know, Blue Oyster Cult, Rainbow, The Scorpions, Motorhead. But what actually happened was in the year 1974, an artist started out and they were really more of a blues rock band, but they later become one of the pioneering groups of heavy metal. And well, I have decided to focus on them for wave number 2. And what album did I choose? Well, I've actually ranked this artist's albums recently, and this was actually my number 5 pick. But as you've probably guessed by now, that artist is Judas Priest, and my pick is British Steel. Now, as I said, this was my number 5 pick. It was behind Screaming for Vengeance and Defenders of the Faith. Well, those albums came out later. I mean, really, 1980 is about as far as I can push this wave right here. Judas Priest falls under it because they were very, very prominent during the 70s. And Scream for Vengeance, which came out in 82, and Defenders of the Faith, which came out in 84, they're really past their time in this category. I also rank this one behind Sin After Sin and Stained Class. And while I do think those are better albums, this one, as I said, is more accessible to newcomers and mainstream fans. But this thing, again, stepped it up a notch. This has such a powerful kick to it, and I absolutely love it. This is pure heavy metal. This is pure full-fledged metal. And again, it's fast. It's much faster than Black Sabbath, which I love. And this definitely takes on a very, very traditional sound to it. And what I mean by that is it's definitely heavy metal, but it's not, like I said, out of the mainstream, which I definitely do respect. But I plan on seeing these guys on their Invincible Shield tour next month. I believe it's May 16th, 15th, something like that. And I absolutely cannot wait. And they will be playing songs from this album. Now, I have the collector's edition, and so I am only counting the original songs from the album, which are numbers 1 through 9 on disc 1. Rapid Fire. Wow. What an opener. Very fast, and boy, this thing is thrashing. This thing is rocking so incredibly hard. And gosh, the rhythm works, the instrumentation works, the vocals work, everything about it works. It segues into Metal Gods. And from what I understand, they will be playing Rapid Fire and Metal Gods, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. But Metal Gods is slower, it's definitely doomier, but it's awesome, I love it. We have the big hit, Breaking the Law. And actually on the vinyl release, I think the record company forced them to put Breaking the Law as the first song because, that's the one that was getting all the radio play. So, that's kind of lame, but, at least we get to hear the music. But, yes, it's very short and it's still a great song, although I think the first two are better. I gotta admit, Grinder and United I have never really cared for that much, but they're not bad. We have You Don't Have to Be Old to Be Wise, which I think does pick things up a little bit, and it's a little bit faster also, which I like. And it's definitely taking a swipe at parental influence who were probably at the time telling their kids, no, you're not listening to Judas Priest. But no, it's these guys. These guys speak for the youth. Living After Midnight, that was a song I really, really loved in high school, and it's always going to have fond memories for me. But this is the other big radio hit, and it's good. Rage is a little bit bluesier. Actually, it starts out bluesy, and it then segues into a more aggressive and traditional heavy metal section for the rest of the song. And it's kind of interesting because that bass intro sounds a lot different than everything else that's within the song. It's just the bass intro that has a bluesy feel to it. It's kind of interesting. And then, of course, it ends with Stealer, which is a balls-to-the-wall closer. Much like Rapid Fire, it's fast and it's aggressive, and I love it. But that was my pick for the second wave as I've designated British Steel. There are a lot of other worthy contenders for this one, and so I definitely support and respect anyone who may disagree with me. So that was British Steel. Now this is the third wave, and this wave is basically artists who started to originate in the early 80s, and they were definitely stepping things up a notch. I mean, British Steel definitely stepped things up a notch from Black Sabbath. It was raw, it was more aggressive, it was faster, and it was heavier. Well, these guys in this next wave started taking things to even more extremes. And what do I include in this wave? Well, a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal is part of this. In fact, pretty much all of it. So we have Iron Maiden, we have Samson, we have Saxon, we have Def Leppard. We also have thrash metal like Anthrax and Megadeth. We have other new wave of British heavy metal artists I forgot to mention like Diamond Head and Angel Witch and Raven. And it also includes black metal. So that's your Merciful Fate right there. But once again, you can probably guess that those artists do not really are going to appeal to the wider mainstream as much as maybe the previous two did. But there is an artist that originated in this era in 1983, and well, they are basically household names by this point. But what album am I going to choose? Well, their first one was Legendary. Their third one, I really struggled with. I thought I was going to pick their third one, but I'm going to go with their sophomore effort. And this is definite middle school for me. And the artist is Metallica, and the album is Ride the Lightning. Pure, unapologetic thrash metal. And as I said, the first album, Kill 'Em All, was legendary, but it was also very basic. Okay? It was just basically four guys by the names of James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Cliff Burton, and Kirk Hammett, just trying to be as loud and aggressive as possible, and I loved every second of it. But you can definitely tell there's some maturity in this album because this definitely starts driving or diving more into progressive metal, but it's still definitely a thrash metal album. But yeah, Fight Fire with Fire. This would be the staple for the next three albums by Metallica, actually. We have kind of a soft intro before things start exploding. And I love it. And I heard them play this one time in concert. We have the title track, Ride the Lightning. I loved it in middle school, okay? Nowadays, it's not really my favorite, but it is starting to gain popularity, so I respect that. But really, guys, the reason why I chose this one over Master of Puppets is basically For Whom the Bell Tolls is probably one of the most well-known songs that they have at this point. I have heard this at sporting events. I've heard it on the radio far more than anything off of Puppets. So I think because of this, Ride the Lightning fits the category that I'm going for a lot more than Puppets does. We have Fade to Black, which definitely turned off some audiences because this was more of a soft and somber number, but it picks up the second half. It has got some explosive guitar solos towards the end, and it's fast the entire second half. So to those people, I say, Trapped Under Ice and Escape are probably the weakest ones on here, but I still love them. Creeping Death is one of my all-time favorites. This thing is biblical, and I absolutely love it. I've learned how to play it on guitar somewhat. I'm not particularly good, but I try. But really, when I say that Ride the Lightning made huge steps upon Kill 'Em All, I'm really talking about the Call of Cthulhu. This thing is an instrumental, but it is pure prog metal, and it's awesome. It takes the format of classical music, but of course it's heavy metal and thrash prog metal, and it's absolutely awesome. It's multi-sectioned, it builds on itself, and the end returns back to the opening soft guitar riff before having a very explosive conclusion. And for that, I am giving the Abraham Lincoln spot to Ride the Lightning. Again, Puppets was a worthy contender, but I went with this. Okay, now we are on the very last wave, and I might get some disagreement on this one. But to this, I am designating the last wave as originating in probably around the year 1985 or so, and pretty much running up to the year 1990. Metal was pretty much on its way out by the year 1990, and genres like grunge were starting to take over. But this would be the pop metal. This would be the glam metal. This would be the quote-unquote hair metal. And artists that fall under this, I would say Poison does. I would say Cinderella does. Yeah, I know a lot of those bands get some hate, and well, I can see it, but I think their music is well written, which is why I listen to them. Bon Jovi definitely falls under this. So does Skid Row and White Lion. But I'll also say this, Motley Crue definitely exploited this movement for all it was worth. I will say that with Girls, 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 and to a lesser extent, Dr. Feelgood. Well, I didn't lump Motley Crue into this movement because they originated in 1981 and they very much were not glam metal during that time. They didn't really become glam metal until later, so I kind of excluded them from this segment. Def Leppard I also excluded from this segment because, again, they originated in 1980 and they very much were not pop metal, but yes. In 1987, they released Hysteria, and they definitely, like I said, exploited this and used it for all it was worth. Well, there was another album that came out in 1987 as well that I absolutely love. I do not have a lot of love for Hysteria, but I do actually really love this one. This is probably the very first album from this time period that is representative of this time period that I really heard, and that is going to be, and by the way, I have heard people say this is not heavy metal. I respect that, but at the same time, I can see it going the other way, and Wikipedia called this heavy metal, and that is Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. And yes, I do really, really love this album. It's got a very nice, slick production to it, but not too slick, and the riffs are very well written. The songs are very well written. They are catchy, they flow together, and I love it. And this has definite mainstream appeal. And I'm going to be honest, today I am starting to warm up to Welcome to the Jungle once again. I loved it the very first time I heard it. I was like, this absolutely rocks. But then I got that job at the pool, and I had to hear the radio every single day, and they played it 2 times every day within a 2-hour time period, and I started to get sick of it, but I've not had to listen to the radio for a very long time, and the damage is starting to undo itself. But yeah, we have It's So Easy. Great song. I didn't like it at first, now I love it. Night Train, Loved it from the very first time I heard it. Out to Get Me starts off with a killer guitar intro, and it's absolutely incredible. Very aggressive and very raw. Mr. Brownstone has a nice Bo Diddy beat to it, and it's also really, really amazing. Again, this is one I really warmed up to later. Paradise City, I recognized it immediately, and yeah, it's a little overplayed, but it's fine. It's a great song. Then we have My Michelle and Think About You, which may be a little bit weaker than what came before it. Sweet Child of Mine, I have not fully warmed up to. This is another one of those songs that has been overplayed to death, and I don't think I'm quite ready to let that one back in my life yet. But it all concludes with You're Crazy, Anything Goes, and the very mighty Rocket Queen. Rocket Queen is actually really, really amazing. It's a little bit slower, but again, it's well written. The instruments are great. The vocals are great. It's absolutely amazing. And it's got a little coda at the end, which I also really, really respect. But that is the pick that I have made for wave number 4, the glam hair metal wave, the glam hair metal genre, and it's going to be Appetite for Destruction. So let's kind of get all these guys in their rightful place right here. First thing, we have the George Washington pick, and that was Black Sabbath. And then we had the Thomas Jefferson pick, and that was British Steel by Judas Priest. And I believe that Teddy Roosevelt comes next, and that, of course, would be Guns N' Roses. And then finally, up here on the other side is actually the third wave, but that's the Abraham Lincoln spot, and that is going to be Ride the Lightning. So that right there, and let me get that glare out of the way. Can I? Yeah, that's a little bit better. So anyways, that was my Mount Rushmore of heavy metal albums. And I want to say thank you guys very much for tuning in. And yes, there were other ones I could have picked. There are some other very, very definite contenders. I am just basing this off my perception and what I think would be best for a representation of these different eras and what a newcomer to heavy metal should probably listen to first. So thank you all very much, and I had a great time having this discussion. Again, please post your comments or your opinion, whether you agree or disagree, in the comments section. Next time, I'm going to return to Album Rant, and I have selected an album that absolutely rocks. But until then, have a very pleasant evening.